Good evening, everybody. We got quorum in the end, so well done, and welcome again, Michael Winstanley. So we're going to got a couple of members that are going to need to leave at approximately 7 o'clock. Is it 7 o'clock or is it 10? Just before 7. So we're going to get through the right up to item 6 and including item 6 by 7 o'clock if we can. So over to Donna for any apologies. I think we've got a few.
I've got apologies from Sorry. I've got apologies from Councillor Debbie Newell, Councillor Stella Smith, Councillor Tim Pickstone, Councillor John McGarth and Councillor Colin McLavin.
Thank you. Any others from members? No. So I've got no announcements or any urgent business. Declarations of interest. I've certainly not got any. Has anybody else got any declarations of interest? No. And then straight on to the minutes of the last meeting. We've all had them. Have we all read them? And would somebody like to propose them if we have? Neil Butterworth and seconded by John Bell. That's great. Thank you. Noted pass. Yeah, great. And next one is Pam Stewart. I think she came to a couple of meetings. She's had to step down from the committee. I think we all are aware she stepped down due to ill health. And so we've got yet another vacancy, so we could all just be aware of that. And then moving straight on to the GMCA Communications and Engagement Update. Claire Norman.
Thank you. So my name is Claire Norman. I'm Director of Communications and Engagement for the Combined Authority, and I also look after the Health and Social Care Partnership as well. So I'm trying to ensure that our work is aligned across Greater Manchester. So just to go back slightly to remind you how we've got here. So historically, the Combined Authority has not had dedicated comms support, so the work was looked after by the relevant chief execs and leaders teams out in the councils. This grew slightly in 2015 and a small amount of resource was spent on comms here. And then as the Combined Authority itself changed last year, so the comms team started to change too. So the CA itself went from a handful of people to hundreds and actually, well over 1,000 if we include the fire service, and was given new powers, and the mayor came in, and what we brought together was an integrated comms team that supported those different functions. So fire, police and crime commissioner, the small function that was here on its own, and I come in looking after health as well. So, and it is actually the first team of its kind in the country that covers all these different areas. So at the same time as that was happening, the Task and Finish group looking at communications was set up, which was really helpful as we were forming the team to actually get some of that insight and feedback from across Greater Manchester as well. So you've got the report and the recommendations here, so I won't go through that, but there were a number of focus recommendations that we were asked to look at. So ensuring there was support around the mayoral election, developing the leadership around communications, some clear messaging, ensuring we involved members and staff, and also making sure we measured and described success. So what I've tried to do relatively briefly in this paper is go through how we've addressed some of those. So the election support, which seems like a very long time ago now, we developed our own Greater Manchester campaign. There was also a national campaign around the Metro Mayor elections. So significant media coverage here and nationally. And actually that resulted in quite a high level of awareness of the election and a reasonably good turnout, which I believe has given those new Metro Mayors the mandate. At the same time, in order to build the awareness of the Combined Authority and the Mayor and the powers, we produced a suite of documents, a toolkit that was shared across Greater Manchester. Largely focused at members, but has been up on the Combined Authority website and is open to the public, available for anybody. So that really answered the questions: what is the Combined Authority? What does it do? What's its responsibilities? And what will the new mayor do? And I think recent perception testing, we haven't done a huge amount, but low-level perception testing is such that people are generally aware, far more aware than they were before, of the role of the mayor and also as well of devolution. So it's also given us the chance to further develop our working with the 40 or so public sector organisations across Greater Manchester. And I think, as I mentioned in the report, when that came to us having to obviously deal with the communications around the arena attack, some of that work we'd done in the previous year to build those relationships served us very well with what was actually a very new team at the time. So in terms of leadership and messaging, we've really been shaping the Greater Manchester messaging based on the Greater Manchester strategy. So that work's happened concurrently. The Greater Manchester strategy, which was launched end of September, is the blueprint for Greater Manchester, and hopefully the place-based call to action around that vision that we want to make this one of the best places in the world. So the comms team were quite involved in shaping that messaging, trying to make it simple. There is a toolkit, which I hope you'll have seen, just to say, look, to make this one of the best places in the world, there are 10 big areas that we're working on, and these are the main things we want to achieve. Obviously, the implementation plan, which you've got, I know, later on the agenda from the strategy, is now being developed. So we are keeping a close eye on that, and what we'll start to do is develop some communications planning and materials based on those 10 priority areas. And we are also shaping our support within the central team for the portfolios to cut it. We're trying to think about how we cut this best in terms of supporting the priorities, in terms of supporting the portfolios. But as we get to the stage where the action plan's finalised, we should have quite clear comms plans and some comms actions to go alongside that. And that's when we'll actually refresh the Greater Manchester communications strategy as well, so that we are leading, the GMS is leading us and we're following behind with the communications. And at the same time, we are, along with other teams in the Combined Authority, reviewing the form and function of the team to make sure that it is fit for the future and that it's able to deliver against all of those things that we're focusing on in Greater Manchester. In terms of engagement specifically and involvement, we started to shape a new approach to engagement, really, which was largely being led by the Mayor. So this is about co-designing and developing the way we do things together. So you'll be aware we've had 2 digital summits now, which have been used to develop the work around digital connectivity, which is one of those 10 priority areas. There's a Green Summit due to happen on March the 21st, which again brings together a lot of those different stakeholders. Last week we had agreement to progress with the homelessness strategy, which has been developed along with the Homeless Action Network. But we've also been looking at more traditional digital and hitting the streets style methods of engagement. So we ran the engagement running up to the publication of the Police and Crime Plan, worked with Transport for Greater Manchester on the congestion conversation. There is a more from a health side, the Making Smoking History and the tobacco conversation, which is happening at the moment. And of course, we are planning for the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework consultation, which will be coming our way early in the summer. We have the first meeting of the Youth Combined Authority about to happen too, so there's a real focus on young people's engagement. And there's the refreshed scrutiny functions across Greater Manchester. In terms of integration of the teams as well and the communications function, there's quite a lot happened over the last year, which is building on the previous work. Over the last couple of years, really, that's brought together the heads of communications engagement from across the different parts of Greater Manchester. We all now meet at least monthly, some of us more than monthly, and we also have specific subgroups looking at some of those big areas, so Spatial Framework, Green Summit, the Digital Plan. We ran one campaign. We have a subgroup looking at urgent and winter care, so we ran one flu campaign, for example, across Greater Manchester, which is the first time we've really managed to actually all come together, all contribute and all deliver one campaign. So that's an absolute focus in the coming months. How do we do this better across Greater Manchester and deliver some of those efficiencies that come with doing things once? We've got a shared media protocol now, so it doesn't entirely always work, but the intention is that we're sharing things more widely, and we're planning together, and we're planning together as well. There are still areas for improvement, without a doubt. It's been a very busy first 10 months, and I think as we get to the final development of the Greater Manchester strategy and the implementation plan, so we will get to the final development of the communications and engagement support to go along with it. We need to do these campaigns once. We shouldn't all be running different campaigns at different times when we're all trying to reach the same audiences. And I'm sure there are other areas where we could do better, and I would welcome any feedback on that. So I think in summary, still work in progress. Much has happened, and some quite clear plans for the next 6 to 12 months. Take any questions? Thank you.
Right, thank you for that. Before we dive into our questions, and I'll note those two down. Angelique Stodgier, is that right? Great. Was chair of the previous scrutiny task and finish group. Have you got any initial thoughts that you'd like to add into that before we go to our question and answers? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's a pleasure to be back at scrutiny, and I can see a couple of familiar faces and people that I was working with when we were putting the document together. Thanks to your help as well. We had fantastic support from the officers. I think I've got 3 major points to make, but before that I would like to preface it. The paper doesn't give much sense of a budget resource that you have to call on, so it's difficult to make a judgment on how things have progressed and why some things have progressed more than others, and some things have progressed faster, whereas the others are taking some pace. So going to the first comment, I think that you have said it, Claire, that there's lots of work have been going on, and it looks that the paper reflects that very well. In order to add to the communication functions of the CA, so bringing in health, fire, police, TFGM is not still here. And then also, looking at the arena attack and all the media interest, and very, very important times for the transition to the combined authority and the mayoral function. And I think that looking back, we need to reflect on some really, really good successes that your team has had. So lots of work has been done to focus on the mayor and the mayoral priorities, to get people on board with the elected mayor, the precepts, to understand what has been happening and the strength of direct mandate of the mayor. So you have the mayoral campaign, the 100-day plan. I think if the mayor was here, maybe he could tell us. My impression is that he would be he was very well supported, because other combined authorities did not have that function. So I think we were always on the front foot with that. Proactive, well-placed media coverage, national, international coverage, and I think that there are some obvious successes and some cracking good work that has happened. So I'd like to congratulate you for that. But I'd like to go to the second point, which is the lack of attention, I think, on the Greater Manchester strategies themselves. So not much effort has gone into communications and engagement with the actual Greater Manchester strategy. I'm not sure what activity has been done to communicate what the CA is trying to achieve and those high-level messages that we were talking about back then. And I think that what the report reflects is that you have focused on outputs, so how many items on media rather than outcomes. Because as an elected member, especially as we were only this morning discussing the mayor precept, looking at the media coverage for that, also listening to local radio stations, I don't think that people have got the message about what is the mayor, what are his powers, and also what is the interplay between the mayor and the local authorities. So I think there's still a lack of understanding of basic concepts, and also there is lack of an overall narrative, as well as for elected members and for people. I think that elected members are still confused about the mayoral role and powers and the local authority powers. Which brings me to my third and sort of final point. This creates missed opportunities, both at the national and at the regional level. So how do we present ourselves with a common narrative and a common message when we talk to the government, to the Northern Powerhouse, to core cities, to Scotland, Europe, Northern Ireland and all that? So there's no clear communication on what are our key priorities as a combined authority, the key aims, the key objectives. Therefore, there's a missed opportunity, and you reflected on that, on opportunities to work together and have joint campaigns approach, so that we have 10, 11 or 12 different campaigns, different priorities and objectives. And I think it would save more time and also resource if we worked together. So there seems to be a lack of strategic view of how work progresses in the 10 local authorities and how it progresses at the combined authority level. or how the combined authority develops an engagement strategy in areas where senior local authority staff are responsible for communication. So I think it would benefit if all of these people that have got their power, so senior members of communication teams in the local authorities come together, that have the power to commit on the 10 things that you can be doing at the combined authority level, and then what individual local authorities do. And I will use another example around the missed opportunities and how we can be tactical. Again, building again on the mayor preset. So soon enough, the local authorities will be sending council tax bills. I think that there's an opportunity there for the actual letters that go out to have key messages around the budget narrative and around who is the mayor, what does he do, what are the powers, what is the precept. And now the local authorities have got the luxury to do sort of their own communications. Of course they would, but wouldn't it be better if we had some common messages to go out? So therefore, very quickly, and I would like to recommend or throw in the mix of recommendations, if you allow me, Chair. The draft communication strategy should come to scrutiny. I think it's an overdue item. I would ask that it comes here for you to review in the next 3 months. I think we need to be clear on the communication objectives and therefore the communication key messages and then the outcomes that we want to use, and then we need to have robust measures of success. And lastly, what is missing from the room today is the political lead. So whose portfolio is this? And who will be focusing on the key political messages and then develop the messaging for everyone to share, and then also a CEO, chief executive support to underpin it. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you for that. So I am going to take, have you got any brief responses, or do you want to take questions from, okay. So I'm going to start with John, then I go to Neil. Anybody else?
You know, I was on the working group, well, task and finish group with Angelica, and I have to say it's been a very difficult year of the combined authority. The first month when the mayor took over was the tragic situation at Manchester Arena. That must have taken a lot of time up of officers dealing with that. And I think that there has been great strides in a very difficult situation to get the message over just what the combined authority is about. But my notes here, which I made before the meeting, coincides with a lot that Angelica has come out with. And that is the mayoral precept. The mayor, Andy Burnham, has a very high profile, probably from his national stance as being a former Secretary of State. He has a high profile, but with the mayoral precept, he's going to have to justify his role. And when the public see, I think, is it £7 or £8? I can't remember what the charge is now, which will appear on council tax bills. Council taxpayers were not told that they would have to pay between £6 and £18 per annum before the elected mayor role was created. Now, if you take account of the police precept, in addition to the mayoral precept, it means an average overall precept rise of more than 8%. Fortunately, there's no precept from fire this year. But I also note that the Liverpool mayor, Steve Rotherham, has announced no precept at all this year. I think we have to be concerned by the high council tax burden already facing households, and we're all as elected members going to be out on the doorstep, and when these council tax bills appear, it's going to say mayoral precept, and they are going to they are really going to go for us on it. And so therefore we as a combined authority must, in the most simplest of terms, ensure that the public know what we're about. and what the strategic plan for the long term is of this authority. And I'm glad Richard's here, perhaps, because perhaps you can give us some indication of how he proposes that this will be set out, so it's simple to understand by every council taxpayer in this region.
I'm going to take Neil and then take some responses. I'm conscious we've got to fit this all in before 7 o'clock.
Thank you very much. I'm with John on quite a lot of this, actually, on the way through. And first of all, can I thank Claire and Angelica for the work that they've put in there, because it's both very, very good reports. I know a little bit more about Angelica's report because obviously I was there at the incept of that when it first started, and I know the amount of work that went into it. We came back from this original meeting that we had on communications, and it was, I think, I'm right in saying, Angelica, it was focused particularly on members more than any other area than the general public. And we had a few meetings where we got Eamon Boylan across to Rochdale to have a look at and tell members what was actually going on. That was a success. That worked. My question is from here is we need to do more of that. Not necessarily on the electronic bit, that a lot of these members respond to this face-to-face meeting with the people that are actually in control of these things. We need to get more of that face-to-face contact. But more importantly than that, for the members, is that the things that we put into these reports, the efforts that we put into there, the amount of information that goes in needs to be followed through. So it's fine having all these meetings and talking about it. If we don't actually put it into action, we're just wasting an awful lot of time and people's money as well. So let's give them value for money. If we are going to charge these rates for the mayoral system, let's give value for money from it. Let people know what they're doing, what the money's being spent on, what they're getting for value for money. And communications is essence to all of that. All of that. Thank you.
Go to Claire and then I can come back to Luke.
So just specifically in terms of the comms we've done around the precept, we have done some quite clear messaging to support your council comms colleagues, because some of this we've done directly, but largely that's exactly where it'll land with people. So that is there. I don't have all the detail on it, but I will double check tomorrow that what we've got we have shared widely, with the intention that people can then put this in some context when they do their own local comms. I think on a wider point, it's an absolutely fair point, and I was part of that whole task and finish group, so I have had it at the back of my mind over this last year, and I absolutely hear your points. I think these, we do have the Greater Manchester Strategy. There's a big version, there's a summary, and there's a very brief summary. And actually, what we're doing right now, and we've met about this last week, is say, how do we really make these 10 priority areas clear now? How do we get those really clear messaging so that we're telling the people out there that these are the 10 priorities for everyone in Greater Manchester, not just the CA, the other partners in Greater Manchester as well, and how we're all working together to deliver this. And I think we can do more, and we will do more to make sure that the pieces of activity that you see are put in that context. So when we can go back out to people, we can say, do you know what Greater Manchester's all about and what it's trying to achieve? And I think to respond to Angelique's point as well, that the clarity about what does this team here do with its resources, and actually how do we draw on the resources of everybody else's teams, and what's a Greater Manchester thing and what's a local thing, and how do we work together? That absolutely we do need to do more, and we are continuing to try to do that. But it is very helpful feedback, and I'm more than happy to bring the strategy back here and talk through it once it's drafted.
Luke.
Thank you. So I'm conscious of Angelique's comments, some of the more critical ones in particular. And I think that those are legitimate, but also I'm conscious that you're doing quite a lot with a little resource compared to other cities in the UK and internationally. I don't know if you have a sense of comparison, but I know that London has a massive comms team, as we'll be familiar with, and perhaps they don't even cover the same policy areas as you do as well. So do you have a sense of an optimal size that you think would be most efficient? Not obviously within reason, but compared to other cities, compared to the functions that each of you do you feel like, how big is your team? How much resource do you have, first of all?
So there are 17 people in the team, and 2 of those are apprentices. And that is the resource that we had from those different areas that came in. Is that the right size? Is a difficult question. It's different to other teams, without a doubt. It's different to London, but we're a different organisation to London as well. You know, we are one team providing support to all elements of the combined authority as one team. I think as we work through all that's expected in terms of us providing support to the activity in the Greater Manchester Strategy Implementation Plan, which I keep coming back to because that's the blueprint for what we want to do and what we want to communicate about, we will see. We will certainly be talking to local authority teams to say, this is your leader and your chief exec's portfolio, how do we all work together on this? I think it's what is the right level? We've delivered fairly successfully over the last year. Would we love to have more? Of course we could, but we have to be realistic, don't we? So I think it's work in progress.
David.
Thank you. Yeah, I was on the subgroup as well, and first of all, I'll say it was a very comprehensive piece of work. I'm sucking up to Angelica here. We did a lot. There was a lot of work done, and the recommendations were very well received. I think from what's happened then, I split it into 3 areas. First of all, there was the election itself. Now we got the turnout to about 29%, which isn't impressive. It's about the same as a local election in my area, and I think it's local election results are higher in other areas, or turnouts are higher. And so have we just turned out the people who normally vote in local elections, or is this a completely separate group of people? We're not quite sure. So we feared that it was going to be very low turnout, or at least it wasn't very low, but it wasn't impressive. Another area was engagement with councillors across the area, and I think there has been an improvement there from my own personal perception in Salford, that councillors now know a lot more about what's going on. If only it's for the spatial strategy and the precept, but they're aware of what's going on. Whereas I think there was a survey brought to us from just before the task group, which showed that many councillors just didn't understand what the GMCA and the mayor was doing. I think possibly the turnout in the election could even been boosted by the fact that one of the candidates, the eventual winner, was a very well-known national figure. Otherwise, what would it have been? Of course, unfortunately and tragically, his profile was raised immediately because of what happened with the bomb very shortly afterwards. My concern is still about the general public, because from what I've seen, and it's in the report, lots of good engagement, communication with groups and interest groups and people who are actually involved in the work that's going on. But the general public tend not to take much notice unless it impinges on them very directly. And I know I go back to the days of the GMC. A very good friend of mine, now no longer with us, was deputy leader of the GMC. And he said to me once, I go to advice surgery every week with district councillors, and in 9 years I've sat with my feet on the table reading the paper, because not one person has ever brought a Greater Manchester issue to me, whereas dozens have been queuing up to see their local councillors on housing issues. So if it doesn't impinge on them, it tends to not be noticed. And unfortunately, the public face, particularly around where I am, of the GMCA and the mayor, is the spatial framework. I live down, not my ward, but 2 or 3 wards away. There's an area which in the original spatial framework was down for 2,000 houses on Greenbelt. And the opposition is vitriolic, and there's a Facebook page which hurls abuse at the spatial framework, and that to them is the mayor. That's them, that's all it's about. Except recently when, as John said, we had the the Mayor's Precept reported. And so that was also a load of vitriol against why am I being asked to pay this money? It's nonsense. So you can get a very negative reaction on the issues. I mean, we've got transport, we've got industrial development, economic development. These are going to be important, particularly transport down the line. But at the moment, the things people know about the Mayor and the GMCA can react quite negatively. And just a final point, again from what John said, we've declared a 4.99% council tax increase on our own services. And that's what's out there in the press, and that's what's out there, that figure. The mayoral precept will push it up a bit. It'll push it over a symbolic 5%, and then people accuse us of lying to them. Because even if it's clear in the document, people will still say, why is my council tax going up to 5.2, 5.3%? Because you didn't say it would. So those are the issues that impinge on the public, unfortunately, can be very, very negative. And we have a tremendous job still to do to make sure that a more positive message gets across. And lots of leaflets is great, but if it doesn't impinge on what people are dealing with at the moment, it goes in the bin and people don't read it.
Thank you, David. I'll add some points and I'll ask you to. I fear, not fear, you've done, without a doubt, a good job has been done in communicating the mayoral election and stuff for the mayor. To me, it appears like you're almost a PR arm for the mayor, in that is all out there. But out there, the public will think the mayor is responsible for homelessness. He might have mained on it, but he isn't. It's a GMCA thing. He is responsible for, fire, police, transport. But I just don't think even members across Greater Manchester know that, let alone the public. And unfortunately, the whole GMCA concept is going to live and die on what comes out in comms. Because if we get 2 years down the line and it's still opaque as it is, and it just looks like we're running a PR campaign for the mayor, we're going to be in terrible trouble because people will not wear it when we're asking them for further. It's £8. Oh, by the way, it's £8. It's £8. So when that's 12 and 14 and 15 in 3-4 years' time, and what does he do with that £8? Even I don't know what he does with that £8. Certainly the public don't know. Any thoughts?
So what I think we've got to be clearer, don't we, about exactly what the mayor is and isn't responsible for. I do understand that. Something we are also working on at the moment. And to be fair, even with my NHS hat on before the mayor, we've had devolution for quite some time now. What difference is it making? What are the benefits and to devolution? And how do we make that real to your average person? Because there's a lot of plans and strategies, but what difference does it make to me living where I live in my street, with my family? So it is something we've been trying to do for the last couple of years. It's a challenging thing to bring it down to that level that people care about. Other than when something difficult happens, the spatial framework is a controversial, piece of work, and we're putting lots of plans in place for it for this summer. So across all of elements of Greater Manchester, in transport, in health, across the combined authority, we're pulling together this, I suppose, Devo dividend, Devo difference. What's changed here since we've actually taken control of some of these things? And that's a piece that actually the local comms people have asked for, because they've said, when we're putting information out, how do we put it in that context that things have changed, things have got different, and people can feel it on the ground? So, for example, 7-8 people a day more here are diagnosed with dementia now, which means they get access to the help and support they need. There's a list of things that are literally sitting in people's inboxes at the moment to verify and check. And that's the sort of thing that we need to share, but we also absolutely do need to be clear. What are combined authority powers, what are local authority powers, and what are mayoral powers? Those boundaries do get blurred. It is sometimes not the most straightforward thing to keep that message up there, but I will take that away and try and focus on that.
Michael.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to pick up on something that David said, actually, because I agree with most of what he said. The only thing that I've got an issue with, really, is in terms of that member engagement at the 10 districts. And I actually don't think there is a great awareness of what the combined authority does or what the mayoral role does either. And I think until we get those basic building blocks in place, because we've obviously got the elected representatives who part of our job is then to explain that's that person's responsibility, that's my role as a local councillor, that's what you're paying your preset for. I think it's very difficult for us across the political parties to actually go out and argue that on the doorstep. And I think the other thing from the mayor himself needs to take responsibility for this. As far as I'm aware, certainly from a Wigan perspective, he's not been out to have a meeting with members of the council in total. Tony Lloyd, as Police and Crime Commissioner, I know, did that and was very much out around the 10 districts doing that. And I actually think, you know, we're nearly a year into the job, and I can listen to GMR and listen to him every Monday doing his mayoral phoning, but where is he talking to councillors in terms of that? We've got the scrutiny here, but for me, there's a fundamental big piece lacking here. And I know the report talks about member engagement, but that really looks at scrutiny, but I think he needs to be much more engaged with members across the 10 districts as well.
Was that another hand? No, wasn't. That's good. Fine, okay. Would you like to contribute anything to that? No. Okay. Of course you may. Sorry.
In terms of coming round, he is actually coming round the districts as far as I know. Been to Stockport, been to the various places, and is coming to Stockport for a second time in March. So I think he's getting out there quite a bit. And certainly when he was being elected, we saw quite a lot of him going round ordinary working men's clubs and stuff like that. So I think it's a bit unfair to say that he hasn't actually spread himself around, actually.
Neil.
Thank you, Chair. Claire, you've got those 2 red books there, which are the first time I've seen them. Can you tell me how many have actually gone out to the members? And if you want me to take 60 back to Rochdale, I'm quite happy to do that, and we'll shove them through their boxes, because it gets down to that basic level, really, of getting the literature, which I'm sure you've spent a lot of time producing, but unless it goes and ends up on members' desks, we're not getting the information through.
Yeah, I have a small box that you can happily take away with you. We've not produced lots of printed ones because we don't, as a rule, as will none of you produce any unnecessary printed ones. But it's there online. But what we did when this launched was produce the toolkit for. We've got this. We had lots of other stuff that we shared with all the local authority and other communications leads, because it's going back to that principle of what do we do at a Greater Manchester level and what are the responsibilities locally. You know, we are not going to tread into other people's territory and go directly to you, but actually we would say to, yeah, exactly, they have got that, and we asked that people shared that and distributed it, yeah, and it goes out, yeah, and chief execs and leaders, and it's gone through all our channels. What we should do is probably revisit it over and over and over again, and maybe we do it once and a big push, and then the next thing. So I will make sure this is shared, because this is good. This, you know, it's actually helpful and it's simple, and it answers, I think, some of these challenges that will enable you to then go and talk about what that big Greater Manchester plan is without having to, you know, carry around the 100-page one with you.
Thank you for that. I worry that we don't actually have not so much an end goal, but what does good comms look like? There was a couple of paragraphs in here that sort of intimated we want to achieve but it was more of a feel rather than we need to get to a point where 50% of the population know what the mayor's response, you know, actually try and nail its hat on, get some sort of actual end goal. Because I do feel that this is a great report from Angeliki, but I almost feel you could just cross out the 7 on 2017 and put an 8 in there. And apart from, and I don't want to detract from the fact that you've supported the mayor phenomenally for 12 months, still we get to the point where nobody knows who's responsible for what. And it just worries me that we're back to square one. We need to come up with some recommendations. Well, you know what? We've got some recommendations. Can we get to that? And I feel like I'm getting at you, and I don't really want to do that. But you've got 15 officers out of a staff in this building, as I understand it, of 200. So 7.5% of the staff are dedicated to telling everybody what's going on.
I think that's a fair challenge. I think we should be setting quite clear targets, and that's what we would do in the comms strategy. The report is great. I absolutely endorse the original and did at the time and still do. I think in defence we would say we've had a very busy year, and what happened was when this report was delivered in February last year, we didn't have a mayor, we didn't have the mayor we didn't have a team in place, we weren't in this building. So actually some of this we have responded to. Other elements we've not been able to for because the world has turned out to be the place it is now, and we couldn't necessarily have predicted that. But we certainly will. When we have the comms and engagement strategy, we should be aiming for certain levels of public awareness and positive attitudes. That whole testing of what people think about this, how is that changing? Are we making progress? Is something we absolutely will and do need to do.
Any more questions? I think we've given you a fair run. Did you want one?
There's been a number of points that have been raised by members, and obviously there are recommendations in the front of the report, but I wonder whether or not the committee wanted to consider some further recommendations just to sort of make it perfectly plain that what was expected. I think it might be quite helpful for Claire and her team. And some of the things that I was hearing from yourselves was that the strategy needs to come back, the new communication strategy should come back to the committee, that we need to circulate more of the GM communications products, such as the GMS, and the associated things to the committee and actually across all the committees, because you're obviously excellent sources of communication and engagements within your district. So I don't think it matters if we duplicate things slightly. It's better to duplicate than think that things are happening brilliantly. I think maybe there is also some stuff that we ought to update committee members exactly where the mayor's been in terms of his engagement with districts, and I think there is quite an extensive diary of district engagement. I think it would just be helpful so colleagues could be aware of where that's happened. I think that's, just to summarise, does that feel about right to the committee? Have I captured what you wanted?
The only thing that's missing there, that is always missing for me, is a sort of metric, a sort of, not so much end game, but a place where we would like to be in, let's arguably say, 12 months' time. If we could define that, if you can somehow get that on paper and say, right, this is where, if we are here in 12 months' time or within 20% of it, we will have been successful and had a good 12 months. Things like disasters notwithstanding, I appreciate that, but we've got no mayoral election next year, etc., etc. We've got a good run at it, and got a good 12 months, and we've got a good starting point. Neil?
Just on that point there, Chair, we're coming up to an item on regarding the way that we do things on the dashboard. Would it not be sensible to look for KPIs that we could put into that dashboard from a comms basis, so we're carrying on the same theme? Yeah?
I'll support that. So, any more on comms? Thank you very much. Thank you, Angelique. Just before you start, Richard, have you any idea how long you might take?
2 minutes.
Fine. So straight over to Richard for a 2-minute synopsis.
Right, thanks very much. Nick Fairclough's come with me. He's actually the author of the report and done most of the work on the living wage engagement. When we came last time, we reported we were applying for the living wage accreditation. I think that was granted about a week later.
Yeah.
So obviously we've done a lot of preparatory work with the foundation to make sure we would tick their boxes. So that's in place. At the time, I think we reported to you there were certain issues on contracts were outstanding, whereas all directly employed people were fine in terms of living wage. There were a number of contracts, and we're carrying on working through those. One of the major ones was the police cleaning contract as part of their PFI. The cleaners were employed by Carillion, so we're assuming, I mean, the service has continued, so someone has taken over their employment, and clearly there's a dialogue to go on with their new employer, who I don't think we're aware of, but in terms of living wage for them. So I think that's probably the thorniest issue that we face in that. As you know, the Waste Disposal Authority comes into the CA from 1st of April. They've confirmed that their directly employed staff are compliant with the living wage, and we will be looking at the contract staff that they've got. As many of you will know, they're on an interim contract at the moment going out for procurement, and I know living wage is part of their sort of social value criteria in their recontracting. That's work in progress. The other piece we've been doing is following a commitment from the Deputy Mayor Beverly Hughes. We have been talking to Greater Manchester Police about them becoming accredited in their own right. The Chief Constable employs the police staff and police officers. They have indicated that their command team is supportive of that, and they're just working through the detail of that. So I think we'd have no reason to suspect that the GMP wouldn't come on board at the appropriate time with their own accreditation. So I think positive news, a few loose ends to tidy up around the contracts.
Any questions on living wage? No. So thank you for that. Much appreciated. Oh, sorry, Luke. Luke.
Well, this kind of relates to two other items on the agenda as well. In fact, I suppose the first thing is, given the discussion we've just had, how has this been communicated? How will it be communicated? It strikes me as quite a success. So I'm obviously very supportive of it personally. I think most of us are. So has there been a big announcement? Maybe I missed it. But if so, then maybe that's a problem. Not necessarily for you, but ongoing sort of announcements and ongoing pushing this message out there to businesses that might otherwise not engage with the authorities, but might hear that sort of signal that Greater Manchester is a living wage city region and might, as a result, start taking it up. The other item that relates to is the performance dashboard and whether there is a way of monitoring this on an ongoing basis through the contracting that we do, and whether the sort of contracting we do has any bite and whether it changes people's behaviour. But then also starting to just measure how many living wage accredited employers there are in Greater Manchester. You probably have a fair idea already. And then perhaps starting to benchmark ourselves against other cities, although they'd be very different, of course, but just starting to look at that going forward. So any comments you have on those couple of things? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for those. Just to answer your second point first, actually, I'll take away your point about measuring contracting. That's one that we'll put into that dashboard. That's something that we'll take forward. In terms of how many businesses within GM are living wage accredited, the last time I heard it was somewhere between 200 and 250, I think. And from what I understand, we are the best outside of London for that. In terms of publicising the fact that we're now an accredited organisation, it was announced during Living Wage Week by the Mayor, but obviously it's something that we need to shout about a bit more.
Any more? Thank you, Richard. I think that's quite an achievement, that really. It's good. So we can get the police on board. Then maybe go out with comms and encourage people to come on board, set ourselves a target for businesses, perhaps. So, great, thank you. It is 10 to 7. So before I think anybody that needs to leave, if we leave now, and then where does that leave us?
I think if members have got some comments that you could make in the info, obviously we could maybe capture comments from yourself, the members that need to leave now, via email. That would be really helpful on the performance dashboard. If the other members, we will now be in quora once these two members have left, but it would be really helpful if we could feed back some additional comments to the team, because they've obviously been working quite hard on the performance dashboard, and I think they, you know, like, it would be quite nice to give them a bit of feedback, if that's okay with you.
So for our online viewers, we're going to go offline now because we're now not quorate. So thank you to the Manchester Labour Group.